Welcome to Retiring Today. I've got the tissues handy, Lauren, because an episode about grief and loss, it's really appropriate for us right now here at Merkel Retirement Planning. We had our show with Kathy Koenig planned a long time ago, but since then we've had a tragedy of sorts here at Merkel Retirement Planning. We lost our friend and colleague Abby Huntrods recently, so we want to take a few minutes to acknowledge her because she deserves that. We've had her on the show a lot, Lauren. People have seen her right here. She helped so many people retire, and let's just talk a little bit about her legacy.
Yeah, she's been on the show for about 3 years, and the funny part about Abby is, like, she wasn't about the cameras, right? She didn't like the cameras. She didn't like the lights or the spotlight at all, but she did the show, and she did the show really well because she was so passionate about helping people through into retirement. And just in the short amount of time that's passed since Abby has passed, we have been, so many people have reached out to us. People who are clients who have been impacted directly by Abby about how she's created the plan and helped them through their anxieties of transitioning from the pre-retirement to the retirement world. People who are not clients, people who just observed the show and got to know Abby through the show have reached out to us to offer their words of condolences. So thank you to everybody who has been a bright spot to us to help us remind us of the impact that she's had on so many people here in the Des Moines community. She was with Merkel Retirement Planning for only about 5 years, which
seems like so much longer. Her impact is so large.
It seems like it's been such a long time, but in the grand scheme of things, 5 years is a very short period of time. And the amount of impact she's made in just a very short period of time is remarkable. And so she will be forever remembered through the Merkel family, by the Merkel family, and through many of you as well. She made a huge impact, and she was so selfless along the way, where she really just wanted to help people through their anxieties, their stress, and lessen all of that to help them have that retirement that they always dreamed of.
Yeah, Abby was diagnosed with breast cancer in early 2020. She fought it, she did the treatments and all those kinds of things, and then the cancer came back a very aggressive form, and Abby just died October 29th at just the age of 32. You know, you're looking at some photos and some video of Abby right now. Just a couple of weeks before Abby passed, we had a Stronger Than Cancer walk, which the whole city of Polk City came out. Many of the families we work with came out. You know, Abby was stronger than cancer, that's for sure.
She definitely was, and the one thing consistent with Abby, as you could see on the screen, is she's always smiling. I mean, even at the cancer walk, she wasn't feeling well, but very few people knew that because of the high energy and that bright smile that Abby always brought with her. So it's one of the characteristics that Abby was well known for, and the other characteristic she was well known for is just how much she really wanted to help people with their retirement. She started at Merkel Retirement Planning on the client servicing team, and quickly she took over the lead of the client servicing team, and then she became an advisor, and that's where she really shined and thrived, because she got to sit down day to day with people and talk to them about what they were feeling and some of the concerns that they had as they were now trying to make the transition into a new phase of their life that they've never been in before. And you could tell as you talked with Abby, and those of you who did sit down with Abby and talk with Abby, and those of you who work with Abby to build your retirement plan, you could tell right away it was all about you. What were your concerns? What do you think? And how could she help you on your mission to achieve your retirement vision? And Abby will forever be remembered by that.
Yeah, so many people left to miss her. You know, Clint and her 2 boys, and the whole team at Merkel Retirement Planning, her family in Eastern Iowa. The legacy, though, that we're most familiar with clearly is what she did here at Merkel Retirement Planning. And Lauren, just speak to a little bit about some of the things we've heard from the families and individuals that we work with.
Yeah, so many people have reached out to us to say they were so grateful that Abby was in their life to help them through that tumultuous time. And I mean, people retire one time, and there's a lot of anxiety that comes with that. And to have somebody like Abby as your advocate to help guide you through that time, and not only to sit there and talk with you, but to show you. Because what Abby did really well was to build these written plans where it was a visual for you to be able to see, here's how much income you can receive. That's one of the biggest pieces of anxiety that a lot of pre-retirees have, because their W-2 wages go away. Where's the income going to come from? Well, it's one thing for me or for Abby or somebody to tell you it's going to be okay, you're going to have enough. It's another thing to be able to see that. And Abby was extremely good and passionate about building those written plans where you could see, here's the income 5 years from now, here's how you're not going to have to worry about running out of income before you run out of time. And then of course the tax plan too. We talk about Abby's smile. When she was talking about tax planning, even on this show, Molly, you remember that really well.
Oh, yeah.
She would just light up
Yes.
because she knew she could help people save a lot of money in the form of decreasing their payments on taxes. And so it was amazing to be a part of her journey here at Merkel Retirement Planning. And one of the things at the service that I thought was really interesting is that there was a lot of different people from different phases of Abby's life. So she used to be a horse trainer prior to coming here.
Amazing, right?
And so there's a lot of people from her horse training days that had very little idea of the impact she was able to make in the retirement planning world. And then of course us in the retirement planning world, we were aware of the horse training days, but we never got to meet those people. And it was just an eclectic group of different phases of her life, and it was really something.
Yeah, to see her on a horse in kind of what I would call more like a horse training gear, you know, the boots and the jeans and the hat, and then we see her here at work with the blazer and the thing. She's one of those people who probably could have done anything.
Yeah.
She could have done anything and done it really well, and she did it so well here. And aren't we so glad that we got to work with her?
Yeah, most definitely. She could have done anything, and she proved that coming from the horse training world to helping people retire and figure out how they're going to pay a lot less in taxes and beat long-term care and all of that. She was dynamic. She was dedicated to other people, and she proved that every single day.
We'll talk with grief counselor and grief coach Kathy Koenig when Retiring Today continues.
When planning a big trip, do you like to look up points of interest, read restaurant reviews, or map out how to take the scenic route? You may spend days or even weeks getting ready for a week-long vacation. What about the 20 or 30-year journey that is retirement? Join us for a complimentary online workshop, Journey to Retirement, December 9th or 14th at 6:30 p.m. What you can learn from the comfort of your own home in these online workshops will help you plan for the most exciting journey of your life. Register today at merkelplan.com.
I feel like a ton of bricks has been taken off my shoulders. They know so much about everything. I'm getting information about Medicare and Social Security. The Merkel retirement team really knows what it is doing. They knock it out of the park with timely responses and empathetic handling of sensitive issues. Thanks for everything you do, Merkel Retirement Planning.
Welcome back to Retiring Today. We're happy to have Kathy Koenig here with us. She's a grief coach and a caregiver coach. We'll talk to her in just a moment, but first, this is Lauren Merkel. He's a certified financial planner, a retirement income certified professional, and a certified financial fiduciary. Lauren, please explain the relationship between Kathy and Merkel Retirement Planning.
Well, we met Kathy not that long ago through a relationship that we both have with the retirement living community. And when we met Kathy, she was an absolute godsend, because what we do is we spend a lot of time talking with our families about the financial aspects of retiring. But one of the components of our retirement plan is the lifestyle plan. And this is a piece of the plan that's overlooked all the time. It's what are you going to spend your days with when you do make this transition from the working world to the retirement world, where now you have all this newfound time that you never really had before. And then also what we find is that in this phase of your life, you're starting to go through things that you probably haven't had a lot of experience or have had to go through before. Like we have a lot of families who are losing loved ones. So there's a lot of grief and emotions that come with that. So what we've done is we've created a grief group that Kathy leads and helps a lot of our families through these emotions and the anxieties and all the things that come with grieving for the loss of a loved one. And then we also have a lot of families who are now caregivers. They're caregiving for parents or a spouse, and there's a lot of anxiety and emotions that go with caregiving as well. So we created a caregiving circle that Kathy leads and helps our families through those emotions and anxieties as well.
Yeah, Kathy, you're a caregiver coach and a grief coach. Let's talk a little bit about the specific needs of the group we're talking about. Lauren touched on it, spouses, or they're caring for someone else. What kinds of things are they going through right now?
For so many of the people who are in this group and then in other groups that I've held and led, there's a continuity of dynamic where people are experiencing change not only in their own lives but also with somebody that they love and care for. Sometimes caregiving is very local and sometimes it's at a distance. So, you might have somebody that you're caring for and they're in a care facility, and so they might not even see themselves as a caregiver. But if you're a decision maker, if you're somebody who's thinking about somebody or having that incorporated and folded into your life, you're a caregiver, and you're one of tens of millions in the United States. The tricky part is so often caregivers feel like, I'm the only one, I'm alone, nobody else knows how I feel. And that's been really the jewel that gets created when we create groups. And this has been a great fun for me to have the opportunity to work with your clients. Caregivers, by and large, are some of the most generous people I've ever known and worked with. They listen to one another, they have an understanding of a similar kind of language, and they are ultimately very generous in terms of sharing any resources that they know about. And they do that in a way without telling somebody what they should do.
So for the people out there that are watching and go, yes, that's happening to me. I'm taking care of my mom or my dad. I'm watching my spouse, their health decline, and I feel like I'm taking care of them. The people watching probably have some emotions in common. What are those?
Often, just on a physical level, there's a lot of fatigue. Like a lot of energy goes into caring for somebody else and then maybe putting your own needs aside. They don't necessarily go away, but they're still there. So there's fatigue, there's worry. Am I doing this right? I'm not trained to do this. I don't have a degree. And yet now we're working with a diagnosis and here's all of this new information. I'm trying to incorporate it. And it's astounding to me how people pick that up very quickly and become very astute. But they worry that, am I doing the right thing? And they often feel very lonely because they feel cut off sometimes from other family and friends. People tend to sort of distance themselves or go away. If they're working, they're struggling with, how they're, performing in the work environment and worry about that. And so often that can kind of be an issue for sometimes not even talking about their caregiver situation. And often, they don't, because it's not like it's something that people necessarily want to hear about.
Yeah, and a lot of times in our experiences, the caregivers, for however long that is, a year or two, it's like they put their lives on hold.
Yeah.
Their normal lives are on hold, and now they're caregiving. And even in those circumstances where it doesn't take a lot of time on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis, it consumes a lot of mental time. Right, so there's a lot of mental capacity that's being used for that caregiving, and if it does also require a lot of time, right, then it's coming at people from a lot of different areas, and it can create it can be very heavy for people as they're trying to work through this. And you're right, there's a lot of isolation from their normal life, their normal activities, the normal people that they would associate with on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, I think that sometimes you make such a good point that it's not something that may always be at a heightened level, but it's background noise, and it can dial up and then it dials down, but it never goes away. It's sort of like a ticker at the bottom of the screen in life. So, and I think that when people too are in a group and they have an opportunity to even hear somebody else's story, they become more aware of how it is impacting them. And it's a shared experience.
Yeah, and then they don't feel so isolated, right? Because there's other people that are going through something that's very similar to them, and it gives them an avenue to just talk with somebody else who's going through that situation. They don't feel as alone, and they can share how they're feeling, and there is some comfort in a group who is like situated.
Exactly. And every group that I've done, somebody will have something that they feel hesitant to speak of, and they'll drop their eyes and they'll say, I don't know if I can ask this question or talk about this, and we encourage it, and then they'll bring up something that they're just feeling worried or scared or whatever feeling they don't think they can talk about. And what's happening in the room is that everyone is nodding their heads. People understand, they get it. And so that gets, they get folded into that with a level of acceptance. And so often people will say in the group, like, I didn't know there were other people like me.
We'll continue our conversation with Kathy in a couple of moments, but here's a great resource for you. So whether you want to talk about the lifestyle plan or the other pieces of a retirement vision, you can schedule a 15-minute retirement checkup call today. Go to the website on your screen. You'll get right to the calendars of the retirement planners here at Merkel Retirement Planning, and you can talk about your retirement vision.
When planning a big trip, do you like to look up points of interest, read restaurant reviews, or map out how to take the scenic route? You may spend days or even weeks getting ready for a week-long vacation. What about the 20 or 30-year journey that is retirement? Join us for a complimentary online workshop, Journey to Retirement, December 9th or 14th at 6:30 p.m. What you can learn from the comfort of your own home in these online workshops will help you plan for the most exciting journey of your life. Register today at merkelplan.com.
I feel like a ton of bricks has been taken off my shoulders. They know so much about everything. I'm getting information about Medicare and Social Security. The Merkel retirement team really knows what it is doing. They knock it out of the park with timely responses and empathetic handling of sensitive issues. Thanks for everything you do, Merkel Retirement Planning.
Welcome back to Retiring Today. This is Lauren Merkel, and we have Kathy Koenig here with us today. Kathy is a grief coach and a caregiver coach. So, Kathy, when we think about grief, I think death is probably the first thing that comes to mind.
Right. I think that that's true, that death is probably the most obvious sort of time when we associate grief with an emotion or an experience, rituals, and all that goes with that. But I think that it's a lot more than that. And so the work I'm doing currently and expect to expand is really helping people to understand all the different ways that grief enters into our life and how we experience those and deal with that. Too often I think we've gotten stuck in some mindsets or concepts around that there's a time limit on things or that there are certain steps we have to go through, and that isn't necessarily true. There are a number of theories around death and dying and grieving that I think are sometimes a little bit more helpful for people. Often people will say to me, how can I get over this?
Sure.
And my response is not so much, we're not going to get over it or under it or around it, but we're going to fold it in because it is a part of your lived experience. And let's bring it in as part of that in a way that feels respectful and gentle, and so that you can own that in a way that's not so hard and raw and harsh, but becomes a part of the lived experience.
Yeah, and Lauren, in your 20 plus years of helping people retire, you've of course seen a lot of death, seen the grief that happens as you move to and through retirement, but you've definitely seen some of these other forms of grief play out.
Yeah, and part of the process of retiring is trying to identify who are you going to be next, really create another purpose for your life. I mean, you work for the same place or done the same thing for 40 years, and a lot of times that work can become your purpose and your identity. So trying to determine what are you going to do when you grow up. A lot of people say that. Yeah. I have yet to figure out what I'm going to do when I grow up, which means when they retire. And that can create a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, and there is a grieving process that people do go through. In fact, that is keeping people from retiring many times. They know that they're getting close to retirement. They're kind of their spouse is waiting for them desperately to retire. The spouse is kind of cheering them on. But there's this process that they have to go through in order for them to be ready emotionally for that next phase of their life, because they have to re-identify what their life is going to look like next.
Kathy, those other forms of grief too. So Lauren talked about, transitioning into retirement, your job is part of your identity. That can be grief. There's moving, there's changing of relationships, and then there's even holidays.
Right, and I absolutely love that you bring up retirement as one of those sort of transition points in life, because it does show up, and if we're not sort of preparing for that along the way, it can be really complex for people, and sometimes we do hold on too long, and that can almost be painful in its own way. And so, yeah, grief has many, many faces. And it can come from things that are actually positive, things we anticipate, things we choose. And then when we have a response to that at some level, or we're talking about to other people, it's confusing. It's almost like, well, why are you upset about that? You chose that. But we're also leaving behind something where we have a lot of memories attached and a lot of, as you say, identity. And what's out here is a little less known. And so there's a little anticipatory anxiety going into that. So helping people just even understand that when they're transitioning, that middle space can be pretty stressful and it can hold grief.
Yeah, and that confusing response from other people, from their peers, from their family members, from their siblings, can add to that loneliness, that alone feeling that they have. And also, should they be feeling like they're feeling? Because what you were talking about, a lot of people, when you're 30, 40, 50 years old, you're thinking about retirement as a really positive experience. I mean, this is a dream where you don't have to work anymore. You let your money work for you. And then they're on the doorsteps of retirement, and now this whole new set of anxieties and stress sets in. And now they're trying to process this when their surroundings, right, the people they care about the most are saying, why are you worried about this? This is what you've been dreaming about. And so all of that comes into play as well, and is part of this grieving process that they got worked through.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And when we get those other messages from outside, no matter what sort of the grief might be, it shuts us down. And so then we don't go through that processing and we don't go through that integration. We might feel shame about having those kinds of feelings, or we're confused, or think there's something wrong with us, when in fact it's really normal. And I like to just set up an opportunity for that to be expressed and examined, and, as I say, integrated.
And let's talk about some of the things you can do, maybe the ways you can at least try to face your grief head on. One thing you say, Kathy, is that you can acknowledge loss. Mm-hmm. What does that look like?
I think acknowledging it is, as you say, facing it. And very often we have a tendency to want to push something away that's painful, and that's I think also normal too. But sometimes bringing it in and naming it, giving it a name, and sometimes we might write about it. Sometimes we might talk about it and just explore it. And it's like befriending it, so it doesn't have this sort of overwhelming, sort of scary, stalking feeling to it. Because I think for most of us, we know that grief doesn't go away. It doesn't, there's not a time limit on it, and it pops up sometimes in very sort of surprising moments, or not surprising. I mean, it can come at certain times of the year. Like there can be anniversary dates, holidays, birthdays, whatever, or just it can be something as simple as a meal that reminds you about something or an experience. And when we can identify with that, then it doesn't have quite the sharp edges to it.
And you say it's important to find others who will listen, whether that be a coach of sorts or someone in your circle.
Yeah.
How can they help?
Well, I think just when we can listen to one another and just hold space without feeling we have to fix it for somebody or give it some platitudes. Sometimes there are some things that are not so helpful to say, other things that are more helpful to say, and I really try and help people figure out some of those things. And have some things in your back pocket so that when you are interacting with somebody, like here's something you might say that might keep the conversation flowing, or at least the relationship kind of have that interaction going instead of shutting it down.
And those are good, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you've said a couple of those to the team members here at Merkel Retirement Planning, and as if you have someone in your life who's going through grief, here are tell us a couple of things that aren't as helpful to say, and maybe a couple of things that are helpful, because I found that very interesting.
I think and I say, with all humility, that I know I've said things that have not been helpful, so we've all had that experience. But I think any phrase that sort of begins with "at least," because or bringing something up where you begin to compare your own experience, it's not as helpful to the person who is bereaved at that moment. Instead, I think being able to, sometimes just saying something is like, "I'm so sorry for this loss," or being able to also say something very positive, a positive memory that you might have about that person. And, it can be a little bit uplifting at a time when people want those kinds of memories too.
And sometimes when people are listening to somebody who is grieving, they feel the pressure that they have to solve something, or they have to say the perfect thing in response to the feelings that the person that they're talking to is feeling, and that's not the case. Sometimes there is no great thing that you can say, and sometimes say nothing at all except for acknowledging that they are grieving and they're going through this hard time is an important thing. We don't always have to solve these problems, and these problems oftentimes can't be solved. It's just working through these emotions that is what the one who's grieving really has to do.
Exactly. And holding that silence, that's not easy. But often it's just, sometimes what people will say is like, wow, that person really listened to me, and that was more valuable.
And Kathy, as we close, can you just please remind people some of the revelations that they could experience if they maybe are considering a grief group or a caregiver circle?
I think that they find that they're not alone, that their experience is more universal. Even if their experience is not the same, it's not going to be the same. But we, as humans, generally want contact. We want connection. We want to know that we are seen, we are heard, we are acknowledged. I think that people become, they have those connections that they cannot always have. And I think when you're grieving, particularly with a death or something, your family are not always going to be the people that can do that with you, because they may also be in their own process. So finding people who are outside of that can also have some benefit as well.
Kathy, thank you so much for joining us today. If you want to talk about the lifestyle plan or any of the aspects of retirement, there's a website on your screen right now. You can schedule that 15-minute complimentary retirement checkup call. This has been Retiring Today, and we thank you for watching.
When planning a big trip, do you like to look up points of interest, read restaurant reviews, or map out how to take the scenic route? You may spend days or even weeks getting ready for a week-long vacation. What about the 20 or 30-year journey that is retirement? Join us for a complimentary online workshop, Journey to Retirement, December 9th or 14th at 6:30 p.m. What you can learn from the comfort of your own home in these online workshops will help you plan for the most exciting journey of your life. Register today at merkelplan.com.
I feel like a ton of bricks has been taken off my shoulders. They know so much about everything. I'm getting information about Medicare and Social Security. The Merkel retirement team really knows what it is doing. They knock it out of the park with timely responses and empathetic handling of sensitive issues. Thanks for everything you do, Merkel Retirement Planning.
Thank you so much for watching Retiring Today. We hope you've enjoyed the show.
See you next week.